Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Albany City Council meeting for October 15th, 2018. Please join Councilmember Pilch in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Barnes. Councilmember Moss.
Here.
Councilmember Pilch.
Here.
Vice Mayor Nason.
Here.
Mayor McQuaid.
Here. The first item tonight is consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted in one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the City Council. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or a member of the audience wishes to request removal of the item from consent calendar. Does any council member wish to pull an item?
5-4.
5-5? Michelle, anything?
No.
Any member of the public wish to pull an additional item? Okay, so 5-4 is first.
Just a very small item. Since we're required to validate the bills of the checks written by the City of Albany, I'd put in a request to the city manager that we also get the credit card statements in this for consistency, because we do it is every single check is outlined in these disbursements, and it seems only right that the credit card statements be there as well. Otherwise, it's just an opaque listing of a bunch of unknown charges. So, not a big deal, and no hurry at all. But I thought that would be a good thing. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, do you want to see the petty cash statements too? I mean.
Okay, 5-4. I pulled it. There's been a lot of questions and comments over the past year on the Berkeley Food and Housing contract, and I just want to be sure that the questions that have come up over the year have been addressed in this new contract. Do you want to just sort of summarize maybe any changes in this contract from before?
Sure. So basically, the scope is a little different than the previous one in that the county now has a coordinated entry. And as part of the coordinated entry, there's been the creation of the North County Hub, which is meant to be a front door of services for people who are homeless in Albany, Berkeley, and Emeryville. So the City of Albany now is part of the Hub program, and everybody who is homeless in Albany who wishes to be assessed then gets access to services that are not only provided through the City of Albany, but also provided through the Hub, which includes also county funding. Another change is the staffing. So we will now have, with the Hub, the changes in position, the names of the positions have changed, and we now have one housing navigator, and that person is now Caitlin Tracy. Robbie Montoya, who had been our housing navigator for the last 2 years, has been promoted to a supervisor of the outreach team for the Hub for the North County, and just recently we've just been assigned Caitlin. And I think that's about it. It's more about terminology, but we're still using rapid rehousing as the the method to house people. So rapid rehousing are meant to be shallow subsidies that last for a certain amount of time, and the county has now adopted a rapid rehousing policy that the Hub and Berkeley Food and Housing Project are using to house Albany people who are homeless in Albany.
Okay, I do have one other question. Can we, and I don't know if we need to include this in the contract or just have an understanding, or maybe can't do it at all. It seems like services need to be provided throughout the night on occasion, not all the time, and early in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that at one point, Berkeley Food and Housing did not want their case managers out at that time.
Right.
But that does seem to me to be a time that there is a need. And certainly we have law enforcement on duty that can accompany them as they have time and as needed. So it seems like that could be something included in the program, whether it's written in or understood or whatever.
Well, with the new outreach team, there's now a 6-member outreach team for North County that serves Albany, Emeryville, and Berkeley. And Caitlin can, when she does outreach early in the morning or later in the afternoon or evening, they recommend that they don't be by themselves, so she can avail herself of assistance from other members of the outreach team. And just to also mention that the outreach team also provides outreach in Albany in addition to Caitlin, so she can always get support from that team as needed. And they're all very aware of the City of Albany. They've done outreach already. We met with them last week and gave them an overview of the places we would like them to provide outreach on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you. Are there any council comments on this? Any member? Hold on.
Oh, a question.
Okay.
So this is more of an administrative change, the hub I'm talking about, with Berkeley Food and Housing. Does it change directly any of the services that we are providing or are getting in this area?
It actually expands our services because we try to target our services and the funding to complement what the county and the hub is doing. So it's actually complementing what we're doing. So we're trying to reorganize, and it's still a transition because it's a fairly new, the coordinated entry is fairly new, the hub is fairly new also. So we're going to take this year to continue to figure out what are the best way to work together and complement each other. But in general, the services have increased because there's more funding that's coming from the county in addition to the funding provided by the City of Albany.
Thank you. I appreciate the update, and future periodic updates will be appreciated as well as this transition happens. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. It did occur to me while I was reading through this that it's great that we are working with Berkeley and Emeryville and having this kind of more regional thing. I wondered, are we reaching out to what's going on in Contra Costa County? We're right up against Emeryville and Richmond, and I'm pretty sure that the folks that are in this predicament are kind of going between different counties. Now I know it's hard to coordinate services.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have different services, but it would seem as we go forward, there needs to be a more kind of even larger regional kind of looking at this position.
Mm-hmm.
The other question that came to mind was, where are we finding housing? When we get them, into that next step, into a place where they have a landlord and.
It's been the biggest challenge right now is that housing is so expensive that to try to house an individual who has limited income or no income, and to make sure that they have a chance of staying housed, the current housing market makes it very, very challenging. So it's difficult to house people. We're looking into different models, such as, which we're already doing with shared housing. But again, it's also difficult to find a landlord willing to rent their home or their duplex to a number of different people, and it's also difficult to find the right combination of roommates.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Now, there is a big affordable housing project going in downtown Berkeley. It's controversial because, you guessed it, it's going to eliminate 120 parking spaces. So is Albany going to have access to that space for housing homeless in Albany? I remember there's been some issues about this over the last several months. And also, is that going to be the site of the hub? Is that building going to be the site of the hub?
I don't know at this point what the prospect of moving the hub to that location. I don't think so, but I don't have any information as far as that.
How long is it until that building opens? Do we know?
I don't know. Do you have? Yeah, a couple years. Mm-hmm.
Rochelle, you got a question?
Yeah, I'm just curious about the relationship or interaction with our resource center efforts operating at the senior center.
Yes, so basically the drop-in hours for we're not now calling it the Human Services Linkages Program, are on Wednesdays and Fridays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And the outreach team, either Caitlin or someone else, makes themselves available during those hours in case somebody needs help and wants to be assessed, or people have questions.
Okay, the funding for that, though, is not part of this, what you've
no.
laid out here. That's an additional
Right.
68,000?
Well, that was last year's number for the pilot project. We're just because we're not renting a space anymore, so it's the Human Services Linkages Program, if I remember correctly, is basically the cost of the part-time coordinator who will be overseeing the program.
So that would be,
I think about like 30,000, and then some oversight, by the neighborhood services manager, and a little bit of funding for supplies but that's
okay, so between this and that, we're at 180,000 roughly for homeless services. Are there any other expenses that I haven't touched on for homeless?
no, not that I.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay. Well, I just want to emphasize the importance of the next point in time count, and that all of us, I hope that everyone with a concern about this issue will become part of that, because we did get this point in time count that said we had 60 or so people, and if we have 60 people, 180,000 is 3,000 roughly for each homeless person at any given point in time. But our police and Berkeley Food and Housing Program thought it was closer to 6. So if that were so, then we'd be spending 30,000 per homeless individual at any given time in Albany, and that seems like really a lot. So I think it's important that we kind of get a handle on what is really happening with this issue. It's hard to allocate resources when there's such a gigantic lack of information about the problem.
And I think with the new outreach team that oversees the 3 cities, we'll get a better sense of who is in Albany and who is moving from one city to the other. I think they'll get a better sense of who is homeless in the area. And we will be, as soon as everyone home starts the organizing for the next point in time count, we will recruit volunteers to help with the count in Albany.
Good.
I'm sorry, one more quick question. Tell me about interactions and information sharing with police, with Albany Police Department and emergency services? Because I assume at 2 or 3 in the morning, they're the first responders who might encounter a homeless person who needs help. And how does that incident report, if there is one, get plugged into the system, for example?
Well, I can't speak for their system, how they, how fire or PD report their incidents outside of when, we're here. Yes, but they will definitely report the matter to the neighborhood services manager, Sid Schoenfeld, who will then follow up with the team, the outreach team, and work with the outreach team and Caitlin to see if the individual is still in Albany, how can that person get help. And just again, today, we had an individual who was on sleeping here at City Hall, and we first started with a call to Caitlin, who came in and did some outreach, offered services, and then continued on with the process. Yeah.
Could have been a tired city council member.
Yes.
I also just wanted to note that the Human Service Center, Resource Center, is also for individuals not experiencing homelessness.
Yes.
So there is a myriad of other issues that individuals may seek service there. And it is housed in our senior center, so one of the interests is to ensure that we seek out anyone in that population that may need assistance with other things.
Is there any public comment on this?
Leah Burrell. I'm with the dog group, and I have recently come on as a volunteer at the Resource Center, and I speak here, and I'm an Albany citizen, and I am homeless. So I've not seen that contract, and I'd like to find out if it could be made available to public people so I could understand more fully the relationship the city has with the BF&H people. I came in last year in September asking for services from BF&H, and they were woefully inadequate. I had a really bad experience. And I understand the staffing is different now. I'm actually working with Caitlin. She may be able to redeem some meager trusts that I have in BF&H in terms of actually being housed. I'm very concerned with the $150,000 budget, give or take, that we spend on them, and having gotten so little last year. I'm concerned about Robbie being the supervisor because she was the person that was very inadequate and let me down in a huge way. I was not housed, and they promised me that I would be housed, and it never happened. I will say if I'm not housed this time, the emotional devastation will be a lot greater the second time around. So what I'm hoping that can be accomplished is this year, until this contract is up in June and we renegotiate or whatever, that they earn this paycheck, that they earn what the city is giving to them, and that they do what they say they're going to do and follow through and treat their clients with respect and with dignity. Treat us as equals, which is something that did not happen for the entire year that I've been waiting for that promise to be fulfilled. So I am hoping that we have a positive relationship with them now and that things change. If not, I'm afraid that that's a waste of your money. So those are my concerns, that we get transparency, and it's an overwrought word these days, that we get what we need from them and that they fulfill their promises and live up to our expectations as a community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments on this? Come on up.
Alan Maris, Albany resident, a member of Diverse Housing Working Group, and a volunteer with the Albany Resource Center. I've been impressed with how Berkeley Food and Housing has improved their services over the last month or two. I think we need to keep track of it to make sure that its effort is sustained. The other thing about the contract, I think about maybe 50 of the 150 is available for actual housing subsidies. It's totally inadequate. And Rochelle Nason mentioned something about 30,000 per homeless person eventually. I don't know how you got to that, but that's probably an appropriate figure. The other thing is I attended a meeting in Berkeley conducted by Mayor Arreguin on measures O and P and O, I guess. One is a $135 million bond issue to provide housing for homeless people in Berkeley. The other is a $7 million per year, like a property transfer tax to provide services for homeless people. Their budget is about 6 times ours, and they're clearly spending significantly more than we are. And I think we need to consider how we can step up and come close to Berkeley. Mayor Arreguin indicated that they spend $17 million a year on their homeless population. That seems a little high to me, but even at half of that, it's 5% of their budget. We're spending way less than 1% of our budget, I think. Well, a little less. Our budget's what, 28 million? And we're spending maybe 220,000? So I would encourage us to do a little better. I think we can. It doesn't seem fair to me that Berkeley is carrying the lion's share. So I hope we'll be able to step up and do a little bit more. Thank you for your service to the community. I know you're doing the best you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more comments on this, could we get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
I'll second.
Poll the council, please.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Nason? Yes. Mayor McQuay?
Yes. Good of the city. Good of the city is a time for persons desiring to address the city council on an item that is not on the agenda. Please note that city policy limits each speaker to 3 minutes. The Brown Act limits the council's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comment or for a future agenda. If you've turned in a comment card, please, and you want to speak, please come up.
Thank you. All right, it's myself again. I wanted to talk about this process of hiring the coordinator for the resource center. I've recently come on as a volunteer there. However, there's 5 or 6 people that have been consistently volunteering for upwards of a year and who have been doing the heavy lifting while Allison Mertz was the coordinator and after she was gone. These volunteers are some of the best people I've ever known. They put in a great amount of energy, time, commitment, and passion with this. During this whole process of hiring the coordinator, very little was asked of the volunteers about the job description, what they would want to see with the coordinator, how they might interact with the coordinator. My comments were such that I felt that the job description read like an entry-level position and it didn't really address the needs of this community. During a discussion we had with the, I forget his title, anyway, Sid, we felt last week that some of us weren't being heard, that we weren't being listened to, that we were being left out of this process. Again, these volunteers have been doing the heavy lifting and have been doing every bit as much as a coordinator would do and perhaps more. And we're not being engaged in this process of hiring this person. Maybe it's standard procedure, but we didn't like it. A lot was left out of the conversation with Sid last week. Maybe there's stuff he can't talk about. I don't know. But basically, we have some of the best people I've ever met. They've consistently showed up every week for the last year. We've had other volunteers a bit at a time come and go, but no one has stuck around. We have been disrespected and not heard, not listened to. We're treated as kind of lower people because we're volunteers. And I'm concerned that we will continue to be in that category. I challenge this city to find any better volunteers than we've got. We are the ones that sustained this, the Resource Center. Without these volunteers, the Resource Center would not be in existence now, and you wouldn't need to hire a coordinator. So I'm feeling really frustrated. There's other members that are feeling hurt and put out and shoved away. And I wanted this body to know as much, that I would expect more respect for the volunteers who have held this Resource Center together for the last year. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Brian Parsley, Albany resident. Real quickly, about a year ago, the residents of Peralta Avenue came before Traffic and Safety and eventually came before the council with regards to a speed hump on our street. At that time, it was deemed that there was need, after multiple surveys, for a speed hump. We are more than happy to wait our turn. I know the process is a very long one. But at that time, Aleda had said that the street treatments, which were also recommended because of the angle of our street. I don't know if many of you are familiar with the 900 block of Peralta as it comes off of Marin. The corners are about 60 degrees, maybe a little less than that, and it's incredibly dangerous. And that those street treatments were also recommended for our block, and that those would could be implemented almost immediately because it was more regards with striping and like plastic ballards and things like that. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's because of a transition with staff, that has kind of fallen by the wayside, and we've seen no treatments for the last year. And what we're hoping for is that we can kind of push towards at least getting those treatments. Like I said, we're more than happy to wait our turn for the speed hump, but those treatments would definitely help our block. It's a very dangerous block. We have cars accelerating down to Marin from Solano, and then cars accelerating down Peralta. Accelerating down Peralta from Solano to Marin, and then the opposite way, which is even a steeper street, to try to make that light. We have a stoplight at our corner. So when that light turns, they're putting on the gas to try to get to that light. So we would hope that staff could maybe relook at this. I don't know if it's got lost somewhere, and hopefully come forward with those street treatments. Thank you.
Excuse me, Brian. This is the street Peralta between Solano and Marin.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on. Council member reports on meetings attended and announcements of future meetings, city manager report and comment. Anyone do anything in the last 2 weeks that you care to share?
I could say a few words.
You could opine.
Yes, on October 8th of last week, I was at the Programs and Projects Committee for the County Transportation Commission. The agenda was mostly about authorizing $7 million for a parking garage on county property next to the Dublin BART station. Also, the allocation of funds to design the new Irvington BART station in Fremont. On the 11th, I attended the recycling board, and both the regular calendar items were, agenda items were informational in general. The one that was most interesting, I thought, was a discussion of Senate Bill 1383, which is now has passed through the legislature and is in law, but they're now trying to write the code for it. This will actually make it will increase the requirements for getting organics out of our trash, with the idea that this is going to reduce methane production. It's going to be very complicated, and sometime within probably the next 5 years, we will be dealing with our waste management and trying to figure out ways to do more source separation on this stuff. And then finally, I wanted to mention Bike to School Day, which was last Wednesday. I participated in that. I went to the middle school. It occurred to me that this is a very, we're not getting the most out of Bike to School Day. What is normally done at the grammar schools, kids show up. If they biked or walked, they get a little treat, or if they've carpooled, actually they get a treat if they just walk up to the table. And then they put stickers on a page. And on the grammar school level, I think that's great. But at middle school, it's starting to not be as effective way to kind of encourage kids to do this. And as far as I know, it's not even done at the high school. And I think there's a lot of things we could be doing in the future regarding, the mountain bike team could have some kind of informational thing at the middle school to try to get kids involved with mountain biking once they get to the high school level. You could start teaching kids how to use a line bike or get an app on their phone or any of the other app services for scooters or bikes. The city could have informational stuff about our bike lanes or our bike planning. I think kids are ready for that kind of thing. And if the whole idea is to get kids out of cars or out of this idea they need to be chauffeured to school, I think we could be pushing the agenda. So that's my 2 cents on meetings attended.
Okay. Michael, anything? Rochelle? Okay, I went to Coffee with the Cops. We had another United Against Hate Week planning session. There was an Alta Bates Task Force meeting. We did the chamber mixer. I think some of you were there. There was a mayor's conference and a meeting on homelessness. The fire department, as always, served us breakfast on Saturday, and probably to 800 of their closest friends. And I did walk and roll to school day at Ocean View, and there were no treats. I'm very sad. We did the sticker thing, and it was, most kids either walked or biked or scootered or whatever.
At Ocean View,
Yeah.
they're very good about that, yeah.
And there was one cute little girl who took the bus, which gave her a big cheer. Okay, city manager report?
Yeah, quick update. A few things that I'd like to bring to the council and the community's attention. Again, a big thank you to the fire department for Fire Prevention Week in general, and of course for the pancake breakfast and open house. So I know we have all hands on, and it's very, very energetic event, and I really appreciate their time and energy. Additionally, a reminder, some of you may have seen alerts, AC alerts over the weekend, threats of turning off the power due to high fire concerns. And I'd like to remind people to go to our website and sign up for those AC alerts. It's the best way to get information quickly for emergency preparedness. Also, if you wander to the community center, we have a new art gallery called The Art of Making Mochi. It is a fun event that everybody should go and check out. Public Works is, again, extremely busy, so bear with me as I go through a few things. I'd like to give special recognition to our Public Works Director, Mark Hurley. He's here tonight. He took his Friday morning to do the Blue Glove Crew, and I know others of us do that, including Councilmember Barnes, but I appreciated Mark's time and energy doing this with the dedicated Blue Glove Crew folks to really have a hands-on experience of how that affects Solano and San Pablo Avenues and what that group does and how Public Works and the city can work collaboratively to improve those streets. We have a new pressure washer as well as a graffiti contractor. Both of those are intended to, hand in hand, improve some of the graffiti and other debris that we have that is an ongoing maintenance obligation for the city. We are also in round 2 of the sidewalk repairs, as you all know, and that started today. Information on the locations and the timing of repairs is on the city's website. East Bay Mud is doing a project in some streets in Albany, and I would like to thank those who have had to work and see this construction over the last several months. I know it has been a challenge for many residents. I personally have experienced it as well, and I'd like to acknowledge the work that our Public Works Department is doing to make sure that East Bay Mud continues to move forward and be responsive to the concerns of our community. We hope to see street repaving on these streets within the month of October. The water filling stations, the water bottle filling stations, are currently being installed in the parks. That started today. We expect the work to be done by the end of February. Rent review, just a reminder that the workshops for tenants and landlords are coming up. This information is posted on our website. But just a reminder that there's 3 workshop dates to choose from with different times depending on your availability, including one on a Saturday. All of these are at our senior center. And the vote by mail box is now open outside. It's always an exciting time to be able to vote without putting a stamp on your ballot. So please take advantage of that. It'll be open through Election Day. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, when you said Mark had a hands-on experience with Blue Glove Crew, that is literally true.
And we do have, can you switch it back to we're a one-man band over here. On Saturday, there is a disaster shelter class. It's offered by the Red Cross. It's at the Albany Senior Center. And I believe there's still space available from what I understand. So if anyone's interested, it's Saturday morning. And it's a great class if anybody has time to go by and check it out. Okay, our presentation, update on East Bay Community Energy, Community Choice Aggregation Program. May we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Mayor McQuaid, members of council. The City Council approved a JPA agreement to join the East Bay Community Energy Program, known as EBCE, in November of 2016. And EBCE is a local public agency tasked with supplying clean electricity at low rates to customers in Alameda County. EBCE procures electricity and provides local renewable resources, while PG&E continues to administer natural gas service, as well as energy transmission, distribution, repair, and billing for EBCE customers. The program launched to commercial and institutional accounts, including municipal accounts, back in June, and they're planning to roll out to residential customers in November. Now residential customers in Albany starting November will have 4 electricity options. So 3 of those options are through EBCE, the Renewable 100 option, which is 100% renewable power, the Brilliant 100 option, which is 100% carbon-free power at the same price as PG&E, which council voted for all Albany customers to use as the default product. The Bright Choice product, which is 1.5% discount to PG&E and is 85% carbon-free electricity, or customers can opt out and receive energy or electricity from PG&E. EBCE is promoting this program, has been promoting it over the past few months to residents at local events and through direct mail pieces, and the city has started an outreach campaign as well. So there's a postcard that I provided to you at the dais, which was finally approved today. It will go to print this week and sent out to all residential accounts in Albany. It explains the program and the 4 electricity options and encourages residents to opt up to the 100% renewable option per council's request. We've also added a page to our website about EBCE and have promoted it on our social media. And we will be sending out this week a special edition sustainability e-news, which will highlight a variety of sustainability programs, but primarily have detailed information about EBCE's launch for residents who are subscribed to our e-news. So I'd like to introduce EBCE staff, Deidre Sanders and JP Ross, who are here to provide an update on the EBCE program launch, as well as the implementation of their local development business plan.
Thank you, Claire. And thank you, council members, for having us here today. It's good to see you. It's good to see you again, Member Pilch, who is a member of our EBCE board, and also Mayor McQuaid, who is also one of our alternates to the EBCE board. I also want to thank you both for your support for EBCE, your active support, particularly given the recent PUC decision on the PCIA, and just wanted to express our appreciation of your active engagement and vocal support. We look forward to continuing to receive that, and know we can depend on you for that. Very quickly, I think we have about 10 minutes of time. We will use it wisely. Following up on Claire's introduction, the reminder of how EBCE came into being, we would also like to just give you a quick update on Albany's performance in our enrollment activities to date. And also might have to count out my colleague here, Dan Lieberman, who is also EBCE staff, known to you, and also an Albany resident. As you can see, Albany is performing pretty much as we have expected, and is on par and in alignment with the rest of the county in terms of enrollment. Because Albany has chosen to opt up its residential counts to Bright 100, you see that, you might kind of blink a little bit to see that EBCE is 89% enrolled in Bright Choice, with Albany being only 0.2%, but that, of course, is just a reminder that that is because of the opt-up. When you look at the opt-up to Brilliant 100, 99% of Albany residents are in Brilliant 100, and that so far we've had 15 opt-up to the Renewable 100, so hence Claire's initiative on behalf of the city, and some of you council members who've expressed an interest in encouraging Albany residents to opt up to Renewable 100. So we're very happy to partner and support Albany in that effort. We have the next slide. And I know some of you have been very interested in and perhaps concerned about the power charge indifference adjustment, otherwise known as the PCIA, but is probably much more commonly known as the exit fee from PG&E. And we just want to say up front that, yes, we are disappointed in the PUC's decision for the alternate proposed decision, which we believe will create some challenges for us moving forward that we would prefer not to have as we implement the program. But we're also are cautiously optimistic. Just reading it down, we're on schedule for our residential launch, which is going to take place in 2 weeks. Starting November 1st, we will begin enrolling our residential customers. That is on schedule, and we are moving forward with it. We're also assessing the PCIA alternate proposed decision. Just happened last Thursday. So we are assessing the potential impacts to our customers. We're going to sit down and we're going to discuss strategies to reduce and limit these impacts. We're very optimistic about our ability to do that, mostly because we're so new and we are still ramping up. Most of the decisions that we will be making about procurement and program design and timing are still in front of us. So we have the agility and the flexibility, we believe, to engage these to the benefit of all of our customers. And as a result, our commitment to provide greener energy at lower cost to our customers remains unchanged. We see no reason at this point to change that. And partly that's because when we began, the board agreed to a modest discount for our customers of 1.5% for the generation charge, and we believe that that was set correctly. We wanted to have some discretion for unknowns, like what the PCIA was going to be. So we believe that we've done well in terms of taking a cautious approach to prepare for that. I want to pause here before we get to JP's presentation on the LDBP, which is still on track. I just want to reassure you that that's why we're here to make this presentation. Nothing has changed. But to answer any questions you may have at this point on the PCIA.
Anybody have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So I see that I think this is the first time you've been able to provide detailed numbers for Albany's enrollment, because I see that we have 15. We hit the magic number 15, which allows us to be public with that information. So that's great, and we seem to be doing well. That's true, isn't it?
Well, it is. Remember, this includes, I should have said, this includes both residential and commercial customers. So this is everybody.
Okay.
So it's not just 15 commercial accounts or 15 residential accounts. It's everybody.
Oh, but yeah, okay. But in the combination, you were able to hit a number of 15, which is good for presentation.
Yes, absolutely positive.
As far as the PCIA goes, I'm a member of the board and been trying to follow this as closely as I can, and there's still some details that elude me sometimes. I heard it stated that although we know something of what the PCIA decision is, there's some details of the decision that were not public until December 31st. Do I have that correct?
I don't know about the date, but I do know about the mystery that, yes, there are some things about it in terms of the details of the decisions and the assumptions that underlay the decisions that we are not yet aware of.
Okay, but that will become public at some point, but just not yet.
Yes, we are anticipating that, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
News reports have indicated that the PCIA will increase the expense by something like 1.68%. So it looks as though that would essentially eliminate the discount involved in Bright Choice and make Brilliant 100 maybe a tiny bit above PG&E. Is that a correct interpretation, or is there?
1.68% of the total bill will be affected by that, where the 1.5% discount is just for the generation charge. So that is more inclusive than our discount, so it doesn't. Does that make sense?
So what do you, it won't, how will it affect people's, let me just say, how will it affect people's
bill?
What people are billed as compared to PG&E, should they fail to opt out?
What I know is that the 1.68% increase to account bills is a total number, which includes all charges related to electricity on the bill, as opposed to the 1.5% discount, which is just for generation. So the 1.68% includes far more
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
I think part of this is still new to me. I'm trying to understand it better, but I do have concern that people are going to feel like they got a bait and switch, and I don't believe that's true. But how do we explain this to people? That it's changed. I believe it's changed from what we agreed to originally with this new PICA or whatever you're calling it. How are we going to explain this to the public so it's really clear to them?
Great question, and we are beginning to develop our communication around it. So our website, we've put together some frequently asked questions around the PCIA that we're going to be posting. We'll also be sending out some messaging to our cities around the PCIA to help you answer these questions directly in case they come straight to you with the question you just asked. Right now, the message is, as I've explained it, we are cautiously optimistic that we're going to be successful. They're going to be able to deliver the things that we promised, partly because we took such a modest discount to begin with. We're also looking at the direction that we believe that PG&E's rates are going to go, and depending on the direction they go in, up or down, and how much up or down, that is also going to play a factor in what the PCIA will be, how it will be set. So without getting too wonky about how that's going to work, we are, and I can't say where it's going to go because they haven't set their rates yet, but we are optimistic about that it's going to be a favorable direction for us. And how much so, I can't say. I will just have to beg that you be patient with us a little bit longer as we go through our assessment of the potential impacts and get back to you with something more substantial as we've, moved through the information that we have available to us.
I think one of my concerns is if you don't know until December 31st and it changes on January 1st.
No, I don't know. No, we don't expect our board to wait that long for us to be able to tell you something.
Could I speak to that a little bit? There was some discussion at either the last board meeting, the board meeting before that, about making sure, and the staff asked us for some leeway on this to make sure that they could anticipate the rate changes as much ahead of time as possible, and that they could they won't know for sure the rates on December 31st, but they're using all the information about the changes ahead of time, during the last part of the year, to anticipate correctly as much as possible. And what I heard previously is that the rates as set previously are guaranteed for now. And they are optimistic for how this will change in the future. And Dan, did you want to add something or no?
Dan was just telling me, and he can correct me if I've got it right. Thank you, Nick, and that was helpful. First of all, our discount remains in place. That is not going to go away. The 1.5% generation discount will remain unchanged. I mean, it stays. So having anticipated that, that's firm. Number one, the energy resource recovery account will be the determining, that will help us understand what the rates are proposed going forward, and that will be made public in November. So we will have information before any final dates of December 31st through the energy resource recovery account in November. So given those two things, and then coming to the EBCE board in November with this firm information, we will have much more clarity before the end of the year. So That is what I can tell you in terms of firm dates and firm numbers.
So am I correct that if somebody at this point wants to totally opt out of this and stay with PG&E, there's no charge to them? And if they choose to do it after a certain date, there is a charge?
Not by us.
But there's a charge by PG&E?
Yes.
Is that correct?
If they, now let me see if I get this right, Dan, and feel free to correct me. If they go back to PG&E within, after the 60-day period, PG&E can charge them a rate for basically adding to the load that they had anticipated. But if they wait another 6 months with us, then they can go back to PG&E without incurring that extra reentry rate. Is that more or less? Let Dan come in and give you the specifics of that.
So if you read our implementation plan, you'll see there is a fee that we could hypothetically charge to customers, $5 per account for residential, $25 per account for commercial, but we have waived that fee through at least June 2019.
And that's a fee to?
It's just an administrative fee for opting out. So we're not charging that fee.
Okay.
But it's possible that we could reconsider and implement, but not until after June 2019. And then as Deidre mentioned, PG&E has two different rates that customers return to if they've been served by EBCE for more than 60 days. One option is for customers to remain on EBCE service for 6 months, and the other is they can return onto a market-based rate for 6 months. It's their choice. Historically, that market-based rate has been below PG&E's rates, and it is currently, but there's no guarantee because it's a market-based rate.
Okay, thank you.
Would it be fair to say that I think I understand some of the confusion because the news reports talk about exit fees as if they're being imposed directly on customers, but the mechanics of all this is how it affects EBCE and their bottom line and their budget, and it's not these changes. This PCIA determination is not affecting individual customers. It goes, I mean, insofar as it affects EBCE only. Is that fair to say?
No, it is a fee for, the fee is intended to equalize, that's why it's called the indifference adjustment, for power that PG&E has purchased in the past in anticipation of certain customers being a part of its load. That load is now departed. They have made the case that there needs to be an adjustment to hold their customers harmless or not harmed by the departing load. Our argument has been that the proposed decision, the original proposed decision, was the one that was truly the balanced decision, and that the alternate proposed decision is not, and it will affect individual customers.
Any other comments? Anything else?
No more questions, but are we going to discuss?
And you have more presentations.
We still have the local development business plan. We do want to leave you up after this presentation and from EBCE, and I'm going to let JP have the happy news part of it. Okay, thank you, JP, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deidre. Good evening. My name is JP Ross. I'm currently working with East Bay Community Energy, implementing some of the first projects that were outlined by the local development business plan. So the LDBP, the local development business plan, was developed over a year with quite a bit of stakeholder input, and really is focused on delivering local development of renewables, clean jobs, reliability into EBCE's territory, supporting community infrastructure. We want to look at storage and other mechanisms of really making East Bay Community Energy a leader. And we want to do that under the umbrella of delivering lower cost, more renewable energy to our customers. So the PCIA decision might make that a little bit harder, and some of the decisions that we'll have to make may very well need to be made under a tighter budget, but the goals and vision of East Bay Community Energy remain completely as originated, and we're continuing to work through some of the first projects and programs that were outlined by the local development business plan, which was really a set of ideas and not really a plan of action. So what we're putting now together is a plan of action. So the initial projects that we're working on right now really fall into three main categories. One is local renewable energy development, rooftop solar, rooftop storage, or non-rooftop, could be on the ground. And the local development business plan mechanism to deliver with that was through what's called a municipal feed-in tariff, where East Bay Community Energy would be set up as the buyer to buy the electricity that is generated by, say, a rooftop or a municipally located solar system. So that's one project. We're also expanding that to look at behind-the-meter projects. So again, in an effort to be economically efficient, many of you may be familiar with net-metered systems where the generation from the system offsets the rate. That's a more economically efficient way to deploy solar. We want to look at how we deploy more solar into EBCE's territory. And we'll figure out how we do it, like a municipal feed-in tariff or knocking down roadblocks to net-metered systems after we work with the city staff to figure out what's the set of projects that we can most quickly implement with our partner cities. So that's project one. Project two is looking at electrification. We like to sell electricity. We actually really like to sell clean electricity, and offsetting gasoline and diesel is a great way to meet climate targets and also improve air quality in the basin. So we want to look at electrification and how we can work with our city partners, looking at medium-duty school buses or other fleets, and how EBCE can work with cities to speed the transition to electric vehicles. And the third is community solar, how we can work with the community to enable participants in our communities who have not historically been able to benefit from solar in new financial mechanisms where there's a diverse set of people who can own and realize benefits from solar. So those are the three projects that we're working on right now, obviously in light of everything else that EBC is trying to get right, like rolling out to residential customers, which is a very big program. So some of the things that we need to work through are how we balance priorities, and this is something that we really need your feedback on as cities and as members of the board. We all want to do lots of solar. We all want every rooftop to have solar, and we want our power to be cheap. We're going to have to make some decisions about how much we do that. The triangle here says, you can have any two of these three priorities. If you want to have low-cost electricity for all of our customers and we want to deploy a lot of solar, then it might be harder to deploy it amongst every rooftop in the city because smaller systems do cost more to deploy. So we're going to have to make some choices, and we'll be working with all of our city partners to, again, look at the projects that we can deploy and also balance how much solar we do with how much it costs and how much it impacts rates and how widely distributed it is. So we're now currently working with setting up meetings with all of our cities. We met with Claire last week and continuing to work with stakeholders to identify what those priorities are. Is it meeting greenhouse gas targets? Is it more local jobs and smaller systems deployed on rooftops? Is it energy reliability with storage and backup power? These are the things that we need your feedback on because we're going to be taking the board's guidance on how we prioritize the development of these local projects. So that's all we've got, and we'd love to hear any feedback that you might have.
You're not asking for feedback on these priorities right now.
So that's one of the things that we've asked staff for, and so you're welcome to provide that. And any off-the-cuff comments we're welcome to, and I know we're short on time, so I'm not looking to open up a large dialogue.
Yeah, thank you. Another day.
Many other days.
All right, thank you very much.
Are there comments from council before he goes? Anything?
well, you know, I'll make a comment. Thank you for the presentation. You know, I've been looking forward to this. It's certainly been in progress for several years now. You know, just speaking from my own feedback, I think greenhouse gas reductions are very big in Albany. So, you know, local job creation, possibly, but low-cost power, maybe. But I know greenhouse gas reductions are sort of number one in the hearts of most of the citizens here.
Yep. We got to look to stack rank it. We want it all, but we got to decide which ones are doing first.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? Can I ask for any public comment before you go? Are there any questions from the public? Is there any? Okay. Well, thank you, and we look forward to hearing from you as we go through this process.
Oh, I thought there might be some public comment on that. I was holding a few comments until then.
We're trying to.
So just briefly, I just wanted to say that I really value my discussions with Dan. And in fact, I'm going to see if I can ride home with him again from the EBCE meeting on Wednesday, because that's when I learned so much about how all this stuff works. But I know that there's many factors that play into how this all works. What PG&E gets to charge us, what we pay for energy, the contracts, and all those things, and those feed into what rates we want to charge, and then at the end of the day, we want to have a balanced budget. And these are sort of some of the things that we go through in the board meetings, and it's, you know, at the end of the day, we have to have a positive rate sheet. And so I hear staff, EBCE staff, saying they're cautiously optimistic, and I would be too. I want to say that it's true what staff has said about the cautious approach to the budget that EBCE staff has taken, and the board bristled against a little bit, because the board wanted to offer really deep discounts and wanted to have this program out of the gate and that program out of the gate. And so I thank EBCE staff for taking a more cautious approach, because now we were hit with this slightly unexpected thing. And I'll have more maybe to clarify all this after I have my ride home with Dan on Wednesday. That's it.
Michelle?
Yeah, I thank you very much, all three of you, for your presentations. I do have a concern that we chose Brilliant 100 as the default based on understandings that may not have been true, and the truth is that over time, we're all vulnerable to the vagaries of the energy markets, and we are all subject to the CPUC's decisions about what constitutes fairness and how to allocate different costs and so forth. I think we've made that decision. It's already out there. But I would like to avoid exacerbating any transparency issues as we talk to people. If we're saying this default is going to be at the same price you currently pay PG&E, well, I think any sensible person realizes what you pay PG&E this month and what you pay PG&E in a couple of months out might be quite different. But I just don't think that we can, I don't feel comfortable making that representation given what has occurred with the CPUC. I'd like to find language that is less promissory about what people are receiving when we really don't know, and we can't make that guarantee.
I just want to ask that you wait and be patient until the November era has come out. I do believe, and I do want to restate, that I think we were sufficiently cautious. I think that the rates are sufficiently modest, even at the Brilliant 100 level, that that your residents are going to be all right at the rate that you've chosen for them. So let's just be cautiously optimistic and give us a little bit of time to see what we have. I don't think it's time for us to surrender the rate that you've chosen.
Well, oh, no, and I'm not suggesting
Okay.
that we change the rate that we've chosen. And in fact, I'm an advocate for encouraging people to opt up, just as a way of expressing their support for the cleanest possible, the most environmentally friendly possible option. But I am suggesting, just as far as our representations to people, that the city not be telling people you're not going to pay any more than you would if you stuck with PG&E, because that just might not be true, and it doesn't really look true right now.
No, the rate is not going to change.
But the fee, I mean, what to the
We'll let
I think
Dan.
that to the typical person who gets a power bill, the rate is the amount of the check they have to write, and they're not making distinctions between rates and fees and surcharges and, all the different kinds of components that go into an energy bill.
So just to make sure everyone understands, EBCE considers that charge as part of our own rate making. So when we set our rates, we're including that exit fee. That has not changed. So customers who are on Brilliant 100, which is 99% of customers in Albany, are paying exactly what they otherwise would have paid, and that is intended to continue. There is no change from that course right now. We're not changing the power mix, and we're not changing the truth that a customer on Brilliant 100, their bill is the same whether they're on Brilliant 100 or on PG&E, even with the fee change. Does that make sense? There is some
your
risk.
business plan has to be changing, and ultimately this kind of cost has to be worked into how you.
That's right. So going forward, what JP was presenting is that there are three ways that it can affect us, right? One is our reserves, two is rates, and three is programs. That's where our extra revenue goes to, and that's where a loss would come from. And what we're saying is we've built in a lot of cushion, as Nick Pilch mentioned. When we were originally setting rates, we were extremely conservative, and we anticipated an increase in the PCIA. So this is something that's not a surprise to us. It's unfortunate, but we did plan for this rainy day to come. And so we're expecting to continue Brilliant 100 to be at the same rate as PG&E rates, even including the fee change, and providing 100% green power at that rate. So I just want to set that's our expectation even now.
Indefinitely, that you don't expect to see that change.
Now, we'll know more, as Deidre mentioned, at the November ERA filing. That's when PG&E gives us more information about where the rates are going. Right now, all we know is that the algebraic equation is changing. It's changing in a way that it covers more ground. It has a greater scope, so that's a potential increase. But we haven't made any change in our direction right now. Our course right now, from what we know, is that we're going to keep Brilliant 100 where it is at the same rate. There's no negative impact on customers because we'll absorb it. Now, it's not a forever guarantee.
This is all about sustainability, and I guess I worry about whether that's really sustainable.
We've had a very conservative approach, extremely conservative, and so this is not good news.
Yeah.
But, until we have more information, I wouldn't go and change what you're telling customers because we don't expect anything to change.
Please don't. No, seriously, please don't. It's not. Conservative approach, cautious approach, built-in reserves. Some of the things I said in the previous in the presentation about things you can do to limit or reduce the impact We've talked about that maybe programs will be investing more incrementally in programs. Maybe we will extend timelines. Maybe we will change the scope of some things. But in terms of what we have promised our customers in terms of their rate, that is fixed. So please keep that, yes.
But is there some time horizon that we can say, well, that it's, for this time horizon, it is
I'm going to
fixed?
ask you to wait until November when we know more and can tell you more. I don't want to speculate without some good information to share with you. I don't want to stimulate concerns beyond what we know when, at the end of the day, we believe that we've got this and that we have set in place management mechanisms and considerations on how we're handling our finances we're going to be fine. And please give us the opportunity to share that news with you, but give us until we get more information. I just want to underscore that we're going to keep the rates changing. I mean, not from changing, excuse me, that was a misstatement. We're going to keep the rates where they are. We have built in a nice cushion for our financials. We have done that so that we can make adjustments on our own, taking into account that we knew that this was going to be coming. We didn't know how it was going to come or how big or how small, so we took a cautious approach. So let us have a chance to assess the impact, share that with you, and continue this conversation.
But our residential customers who go into the default, they will have, how long will they have to opt out if we get bad news in December?
They can opt out within 60 days of...
With no financial impact?
We will not be charging them an exit fee, okay? Even if they stay on the rate, if they stay on the rate beyond the 60 days, we are going to guarantee their rate, okay? So they can stay on us beyond. We will be revisiting. Do we have a date for when we're going to consider rates again? Have we set a date for rate review? Not yet. Okay, so it'll be a discussion at our board, EBCE board December meeting, and we'll have information at that point, and Nick will have that to be able to share with you. So we're not panicking. We are comfortable with where we are. We're feeling, actually, given the decision, we're feeling pretty good about the decisions we've made leading up to this.
Yeah, and I don't want you to think that I'm critiquing the decisions that you've made or the plan or how you're adapting to this bad news from the CPUC. But what I'm questioning is what we are comfortable saying to our residents if we're making promises we can't fulfill. That turn out not to be the case. That's the worry. But it sounds like what you're saying is if there is bad news within a couple of months or something, there's an opportunity to turn it around.
I'm going to say that the bad news is going to be mitigated. We believe we've given ourselves enough margin, and for what we have been able to glean so far from the PCIA, it's within our margins. That's what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. And so I cannot give you anything hard and fast. I don't want to oversell it until we actually have seen the era. Yep. But given what we've been able to surmise, we are feeling very confident about this. So that's what I can say.
And I would urge my fellow council members to also have that confidence and that positive outlook. I am confident as well, having participated in all these meetings, that we'll be just fine. If there was, something catastrophic that happened at the CPUC, you've got to remember that that would affect all the CCAs, of which now there are now very many throughout the state of California, and there would be a huge political backlash. So, it wouldn't be just us. Not that I'm anticipating anything like that, but we're certainly all the CCAs are following this very closely, and I thank Mayor McQuaid as well. I forgot to do that previously, for all the work that she's been doing, writing letters and making sure that the powers that be understand our preference for the other PCIA calculation.
Well, and I think the takeaway here is, as I know you'd probably like to go home and we do need to move on, is that you keep us informed. And that we keep the lines of communication open. And if you start to think that there's something that's sliding away, you really need to let us know. And I'm sure you will. And I thank you again for coming tonight. That was great.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to something. Our quarterly financial update. Could we have a staff report, please?
I'd like to reintroduce our Finance Director, Heather Rowden, who will be providing you with the staff report.
I know you all are really excited for this.
Some of us are.
What? Some of you are? Mm-hmm. Good. I'm glad. All right. So, you guys all got the quarterly financials. This is the year-to-date budget. So what you budgeted versus what we've actually spent so far. I'll go through how the report is set up, what changes I think I'm going to be making to it. But for the most part, this is what I'd like to provide to you every quarter going forward. So it's broken down currently by department, but I've learned that some of the departments are a little bit more granular, so it's going to get a little bit more detailed next time. For example, in the city manager part, that actually includes HR, neighborhood services, and administration, and I think that those should be broken out for you. Yeah. So next time, those departments will be broken out. So that's how it's set up. Expenses first, revenues at the end. We have different categories. We have salaries and wages, benefits, and other expenses. And all of the departments are set up in the exact same order. So you'll see salaries and wages first, benefits next, insurance, retirement, taxes, other expenses, and the other expenses, in theory, should be in the same order. And then as you look at the columns across, we have the first column is what was budgeted. So in our annual update, these are the numbers that we ended up coming up with. The next column is actual, so what we have actually spent year to date. It does not include anything that we've encumbered, any contracts that we have entered into. It just includes the checks that we've cut.
So this is on an accrual basis, not a cash basis?
No, it's on a cash basis because it's what we've actually spent or what we've actually received.
Okay.
And the remaining is the difference and the percentage used. Since we're in the first quarter, we've gone through 25% of the year. So you'll see that the general fund expenses at 21.47% are under that 25. There are a couple of things to think about when you're going through the report. There are certain funds that are going to be front-loaded. For example, insurance. Insurance are huge amounts of money that we pay all at once in the beginning of the year. So that fund will be, 75 to 100% spent, but we're not going to spend any more. So as you go through, there are going to be some accounts that seem high, but it's just because that's, how it is. Or, for example, in recreation, we've done a lot of big events lately. We're probably not going to be doing, another dinner with Albany. So it's some funds or some accounts are going to be front loaded, so they may be a little bit more than that 25%. If As we go through the year, I find anything that is out of whack, I will note that for you. Right now, everything looks to be basically on track. I've compared first quarter spending this year and revenues brought in this year to first quarter last year and the first quarter the year before, and it all seems to be balancing out and on track. There aren't any huge differences. So yeah, that's, like I said, the only difference that I anticipate next quarter is that I'm just going to break it out into more detail. So city manager will be broken out into HR, neighborhood services, admin, and then IT will be broken out into the IT department and cable. For some reason, those are lumped together. So I don't think you want me to go line by line.
No
So
questions.
do you have any questions?
Are there any questions?
I have questions.
Sure.
You mentioned that the expenditures tend to be lumpy and that they're not evenly distributed across the months. Are the revenues lumpy as well?
Yes. So for example, you'll see that we have no property tax revenue in the first quarter. That's because you haven't gotten your bills yet. That's anticipated. The majority of that revenue comes in the second quarter and then in the fourth quarter. So there's certain things that, obviously revenues look like we haven't received 25%. That's not anything to worry about at this point.
Okay. In these line items, you're able to quarterly, whenever, roll them up. So, well, let me just give you an example. Like equipment, do we have a citywide budget number for equipment, and you can roll up just the equipment line and check it against that to make sure we're not overspending on equipment?
So I have much more detailed. So my report is 17 pages long for the general fund. But yes, I can roll those up for you. I can click a button.
I don't want to see it. I just want to know that you can
Yes.
see it.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So here's my last question for now. Your roll-ups occur for the general fund or the top line in this report. Can we go back to the top? If you look at expenditures, keep all the way to the top.
Yep.
The budget is 21 million. If you look at the revenue report,
Right.
it's only 19 million.
Correct.
So are we 2 million in the hole?
So the budget that was passed is 1.4 million short. The understanding was that we'd be going through and that's just for the general fund. When you looked at the budget overall, including special revenue funds, we were up. So the understanding was that there may be some expenses that are put into the general fund, but really are paid for with special revenue, and that special revenue needs to be transferred into the general fund to cover that. That analysis has not been done yet. We've been focusing on other things. But I do plan on doing that, and you will see that before any transfers are made.
But in general, my recollection is the finance manager 6 years ago when we started did a lot of that. There was like several $1 million flying back and forth, and we're going, well, what does any of this mean? So my sense was, it's just my sense, that we were going to try to reduce these expenditures and revenue adjustments between general fund and special accounts.
So there are a couple of different ways to think about this. One is, how much does it cost to run the city? And then I think about how much I need to fund that. Can any of those expenses be covered by other funds? And I think that's probably what he was doing, was saying, so my salary, right? You're hopefully going to pay me the same amount, whether it comes from the general fund or from other funds. But I administer a number of different funds. So we can take some of that special revenue and use it to fund a portion of my salary. So I think that's what he was trying to do with those transfers. If that's what we do, I would bring you a detailed analysis of this percentage of my salary and this percentage of Nicole's salary and this percentage of whatever. And you'd see the backup for those transfers. The other way that you can do it is you can actually say, I'm going to code 25% of this invoice to a special revenue fund. That just means that the general fund is going to have less expenses. But it might be a little bit harder to say how much does it take to actually run the city. So it's really a how do you want to do it kind of thing. You can do it either way. I can bring you the numbers either way.
No, Mike, how do you want to do it? It seems to me you want to maintain flexibility.
Yeah, I kind of do.
Yeah, and I'd also like to advise that we don't always have a solid handle on exactly all the revenue and special funds that we'll receive. For instance, grant funds come and go over time. The HEAP program funding, there's things that throughout the course of any given fiscal year, there will be anomalies, and so that we're a bit flexible and agile, transfers in and out are likely going to be a given to some degree.
And my hope with any transfers are that you understand what is going into them. There would be backup that would be provided with that.
And not all is going to happen after fiscal close, typically between fiscal close and the CAFR.
I hope not. I hope that it would happen before then. We'll see how things progress.
Okay. Thanks.
Other questions?
Yeah, thank you. Is this a new format?
It is.
Okay, so when I looked at this, it seemed very different to me from my recollection of what we had looked at from before. I think I can basically understand what's going on here. This is not my strong suit, but I appreciate that you might in future reports make this a little more granular, as you said, because there were some departments that seemed like, wow, I had no idea the city manager made $800,000 a year, and
Neither did she.
well, but this was, whatever the number was, but this is broken down with a number of other things going on there. So I would appreciate that. And I guess the only other comment, we're talking about revenues coming in. I know one of the ones we won't know about is monies that the fire department gets for going out and fighting fires around the state, which seems to be becoming more common. And I would sort of love to wrap my brain around, what is going on in that,
So I think that is actually broken out under revenues.
I didn't see it called out.
Yeah,
that's what this was.
It's
But
called municipal mutual aid.
mutual aid.
Yeah.
Okay, so is that in the first? That would be in the second one, right?
It's in the revenues. So no, I don't think it's a special fund. I think it's in general fund. Yeah. Oh, it might be under other revenue or current service charges.
We can certainly note that for our next quarterly update.
I could get that. We don't have to do that right this point. The other thing I noted, there's some things like under the recreation department, there was a $20,000 utilities bill that hadn't been budgeted, and it might be interesting. It would be interesting to me anyway to hear, how did that happen? How did we get a big utility bill that wasn't on any of our planning?
And we can definitely define that further as well. As a reminder, the Recreation Department includes the library, so that is certainly an anomaly that makes that budget look much larger. And as we get in more detail as we move forward with this format, we'll make sure that that's clear.
Okay, thank you.
Questions?
I just want to say I love this format. I think it's really clear, and I'm eager to see it more granular. But this is so much easier to read than the CAFR fund accounting format. And the only thing that I would ask, or not ask, but urge you to consider as part of future reporting, is to be more granular on the budget. Have quarterly budgets, and then, you don't have something that says 90% has been spent in the first, whatever, unexpectedly. So you break down each category's expected amount, whether it's something that you spend roughly the same amount every month for 12 months, or if it's something that all hits in the first quarter, it's easier to spot what is abnormal and what's unexpected in the budget to actuals.
And again, if there is anything abnormal, I will note it in the staff report.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, so well, maybe that that eliminates the need for me to ask my questions, because there's certainly in the second document, which is the more the special funds, there's certainly some strange numbers in there. And is there? I'll just go ahead and ask about a few of them, and assuming that it's because of the lumpiness that we have these figures. Paratransit, is it over 50%? Any idea why that is?
So this is, it's sort of hard to do special revenues as budget to actual because there's rollover amounts. They have just lumps of money that are waiting.
Okay.
And we're not going to spend anything unless it's authorized by council. Don't worry.
I don't worry.
I will yell at them. But so it's hard to do special revenues with budget to actual. So some of them may look odd, and it's mostly because they're basically spending money that was allocated last year, and I haven't rolled that over yet.
I see. Okay, that probably would explain the 1,456% over that open space has.
Right.
And these are all, and I also note that a lot of these funds are also relatively small amounts too, which skews that strange percentage as well. So
yeah, like there's one that's 117% spent, and you'd think that's a huge number, and it's like $800.
Right.
So I mean, there's give and take.
Okay, so then I don't have to ask about any more of these. You've looked through all of these and you see no abnormalities, and very good. Thank you.
Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll come back to council. This is simply an information item, so if no one has any other comments, we'll move on.
I do just want to say thank you for bringing this to us, and yeah, the more frequent, the quarterly updates are a great thing, and the more frequent we're able to consider budgetary matters rather than just the once or twice a year, I think it's helpful for council to keep it in the front of our minds and keep track of what's actually happening. So thanks again.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the public hearing. Ordinance amending Chapter 8 of the Municipal Code to revise two definitions in Sections 13-4 and to replace the protest procedures in Section 13-8. May we have a staff report, please?
Right here, what you have in front of you is a proposed ordinance to establish new procedures that are hopefully more streamlined than the existing procedures for consideration of bid protests relating to public works contracts. I know the council likes to see a red line showing changes to previous ordinances. We didn't do that in this situation because it's a complete rewrite of the section that deals with bid protests. So under state law and the Albany City Charter, public works projects have to be awarded to the lowest responsible bidder after a competitive selection process. And the term responsible is a term of art relating to the capability of the contractor to perform the work, their experience, their qualifications, their certifications, and that sort of thing. Under state law, a bidder who is rejected as non-responsible is entitled to challenge that determination through a public hearing. They're entitled to a due process relating to that determination. They're not entitled to a due process hearing if a bid is rejected as non-responsive. Non-responsive means it doesn't include all the required information called for in the bid documents and otherwise doesn't conform to the bid package. So the existing ordinance is somewhat broader in scope than it needs to be. It allows a bid protests in both situations, if there's a non-responsible bidder or if there's a non-responsive bid. This also allows bid protests for individuals who are selected through a RFP-type process where the city is exercising discretion into how to award the contract. And that, again, is not required by law. Under the existing procedures, the individual wants to protest a bid award, has 10 days to file a notice of intention to protest. And then there's a procedure for the department head to consider that notice of intent. And then if the notice of intent is rejected, then there's another 10-day period to file an actual bid protest. So there could be a significant delay in terms of a final determination on whether a protest is rejected or not. And there's also a somewhat cumbersome procedure in the existing ordinance calling for filing of a bid protest bond, which is not something a contractor typically gets, and it's not an easy thing to collect on either if it turns out that you want to charge the costs of processing the bid protest back to the unsuccessful bidder. So the proposed ordinance you have in front of you, first of all, clarifies the definition of public project so that the Albany Municipal Code is consistent with both the charter and state law in terms of the definition. That's fairly technical. It also limits the mandatory opportunity for a bid protest public hearing to the situation where a bidder is rejected as non-responsible. And I would emphasize that's an extremely rare situation to determine a bidder is not qualified. I've never seen it happen in my career. I know that happen occasionally, but it's not a thing that comes up very commonly. More commonly, a bid is rejected because it doesn't contain all the required information called for in the bid package. So the proposed ordinance establishes a 3-day deadline after the opening of bids to file a protest based on a bidder claiming that one of their competitors' bids is defective or the city somehow failed to follow its selection process. The bid protest has to be accompanied by an upfront fee to cover the cost of processing the bid protest, so that's a simpler mechanism than what's in the existing ordinance.
Sorry, Craig, is it 3 days after the bids open or the bids close?
After the bid opening. The bid opening is when the bids are made public, and there's an opportunity for competitors to review the other bids that were submitted. If they have any objections, that's their time to raise them. If a bidder is rejected as non-responsible, then there would have to be a public hearing before that decision is finalized. The city manager would basically appoint a hearing officer to consider that determination and any objections to it. And then at the outcome of that process, there'd be a recommendation from the hearing officer to the city council as to whether the staff determination that the bidder is non-responsible was correct. So I think the advantages of the proposed ordinance are to reduce the scope of the mandatory public hearing process to what is required by law. There is still an opportunity when the city writes up a bid package or an RFP to refer to this process, but it's not mandated for every type of bid. The deadlines are shorter, 3 days instead of 2 10-day time periods. Those are, I think, the major advantages of the proposed ordinance. I would point out there was a typographical error on page 4 of the ordinance. Under subdivision H, kind of on the upper part of page 4, it states that these procedures will also apply to a protest of a contract award that does not involve formal public bidding. It should read, these procedures will not apply. Then it goes on to say, unless specifically provided for. So these procedures only apply in the situation where a due process hearing is required by law, unless the city on a case-by-case basis determines either in the bid package or in the RFP documents to refer to these bid protest procedures. So, Mark, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to there. Okay.
How did this all come about? Is this some uniform standards being promulgated by the state, or?
No, it really was just, a couple of years ago, we had an outside law firm review our contracting procedures and update all of our form contracts. And this was one of the things that Claire Gibson is the attorney. She recommended that at some point we kind of modernize our bid protest procedures. We haven't been getting bid protests, so it hasn't been a front burner thing, but it was just something identified that at some point we should clean up our procedures to make them more streamlined, so we're not in a reactive mode if we actually get a bid protest and we don't have correct procedures in place.
Will this also apply to the school district since they're under the charter, or do they have their own protest?
Yeah, they're not subject to those provisions in our city charter that specify procedures for public works contracts. I assume they're governed by the education code or special provisions in the public contracts code.
Okay.
Other questions?
This looks like a great thing and the right thing to do. Was there some particular event that occurred that caused us to look at this, or was it just someone noticing, oh, we know we're out of date and we need to update this?
Yeah, it was really just our outside attorney who was helping us review our public works procedures and contracts. He said, by the way, first of all, these definitions don't track between the municipal code and the city charter, and also I went through your protest procedures, and these are not what I would recommend if I were creating an ordinance today.
Okay. It sounds like what we are ending up with now is something that's better for the city in general, so it's great.
So I do have a question on page 3D. It says the merits of the protest will be determined by the Public Works Director. Who accepts a bid? I mean, my question is the same person doing both jobs? They're accepting it, and then they're the person who deals with the protest?
So the way the bid process works for these larger projects, the city clerk actually reads the bids aloud and receives the bids. So that's
No, it's on.
oh, it's on the other way around. Sorry. So the city clerk would receive the bids and then read them aloud and then publish the bid results. So there is some separation there.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was concerned about. Okay, is there?
And I would just add that if there's a determination by the Public Works Director to reject a bid protest, then ultimately the City Council would have to affirm that decision at the time you award the contract.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for final comments and a motion.
I'll move approval.
And remember, this is a first reading of this ordinance.
Second.
Can you poll the council, please?
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Nason?
Yes.
Mayor McQuaid?
Yes, and the motion carries. Okay, item 10, unfinished business. Opposition to Proposition 6 on the November 2018 ballot. May we have a staff report, please?
Staff wanted to provide you an impact on the California ballot Proposition 6 on the City of Albany, so we'll go through a couple slides. In 2007, the Road Repair and Accountability Act was passed into law. From there, the purpose of that was really to enable cities and counties to address maintenance issues, prolonged maintenance issues that a lot of times became safety issues on local streets and road systems. So this particular proposition explicitly identified local streets and roads, highway bridges, and pedestrian safety and transit as individually impacted areas, so they got different funding buckets from the Act. And proposition is on the ballot, and it's proposed to prohibit the legislation from imposing any tax. Well, let's back up. So it's proposed to repeal the income provisions of the gas tax, and then on top of that, which isn't really discussed a lot in the media, it also prohibits the legislation from imposing any future tax, such as a gas tax, and that would require a future public proposition on the ballot. The effective date would be January 1 of 2017, so that would be retroactive. One of the key questions that we get asked a lot, or are asked in a lot of the back and forth we get, is would the city be required to return funds already received? So that's a no. The lawyers that have interpreted this say that those funds were received, distributed, so those really aren't on the table, but it would be a retroactive for any funds that are, say, in the Treasury. So let me go through some of the regional and local projects and funding that is in place with SB1, with the gas tax. So Alameda County cities in total receive more than $60 million. That's from the SB1 gas tax. The county itself is receiving more than $42 million and $250 million in congestion corridors and relief management. A lot of that is Caltrans, whether that's additional lanes or simply reconfigurations. And then $100 million for active transportation programs throughout the state. $750 million for mass transit. Those are very large dollar amounts. So agencies such as BART, AC Transit, a lot of local bus agencies are all benefiting from that. So these are benefits that are regionally valuable for our citizens. And then also Albany in 2017 received $106,000. The gas tax was enacted, implemented, and it took about 6 months to get revenues started coming in. So roughly 2017 was about half a year. So we received $106,000 in 2018 and ongoing. We're projecting $300,000 in revenue from SB1. So the current project that was just completed, this is essentially a 2017 project, was Evelyn Avenue between Garfield and Portland. That was 16,000 square feet of new pavement. The 2019 project, we've informed you about it, and it's in our CIP, is the Washington Avenue rehabilitation between San Pablo and Key Route. So I believe that's about 5 or 6 city blocks, 62,000 square feet, and it's been identified as significantly degraded. So if we look at the long-term street rehab funding specifically for the city, we have a mixture of funds. We've had these funds for a while. They include SB1, which is the newest, but we've had at Measure B, vehicle registration fees, the gas tax, which is identified as a zero-cost tier because most of that is going to maintenance. So that's the existing gas tax prior to SB1. Measure BB, and Measure F. So on the pie chart, you can clearly see that SB1 for the long-term management of the city is a large chunk of revenue. It's 32%. So it would be a big hit for the city. This is the table from the adopted CIP. So again, this is kind of laid out in a table format. But at the very bottom, just above the totals, you can see that SB1 is called out $106,000 for the first year and $300,000 for subsequent years. So if that was zeroed out, we would get those amounts reduced. And as we mentioned before, about 30% of our revenue would be reduced. So we would essentially either have to come back to you and say these are the services and these are the streets that are not going to be rehabilitated, or that would be a conversation about future CIP funding. I believe in your packet there's a draft resolution. Essentially, we're recommending to the city adopt a resolution opposing Proposition 6 on the November 18th general election ballot.
Great, thank you very much. Are there comments or questions from council?
Yeah, I have one. Here's my question, and this is sort of a what's the word on the street? It seems odd to me that, for example, the center of opposition to the new gas taxes in places like Orange County in Southern California, where they are way more dependent on roads and being in vehicles than we are up here. So it just strikes me as odd, and I'm wondering if it strikes you and your various colleagues around the state as being odd. Do those folks think they're going to get the money to keep all those streets looking spiffy in LA County and Orange County?
Without speaking for the proponents of Prop 6, I think San Diego County has in the past had a long tradition of opposing any sort of tax increases. So there's a bent that's coming from, and I don't think that answers your question of where do they think they're going to get the money from. That's probably up to them to answer that question.
I think their argument is there's plenty of money. It's just being mishandled up in Sacramento, but I think everybody, probably on the council at least, knows this was a political ploy to get out Republicans to vote in November, and had little to do with reality. Part of me thinks that if by some rare chance there was a Republican that ended up in Sacramento in the governor's office, and this passed, it would be suitable karma for him to have to deal with our highway system. My only other comment is I'm so glad that Caltrans and everybody else started spending the money once it came out very quickly, because I think that is going to help strike this Proposition 6 down, and I'm happy to sign on.
We're still on questions, not comments, questions.
No questions.
No questions.
Is there any public comment? Okay, well, I get to start this time because we're happy to do this. We're all, I'm sure, ready to jump on board. But I also sort of want to remind everybody that this city was early on supporting, SB1. We were writing letters to Senator Beal back in 2017, who carried SB1. We're a member of the No on Prop 6 coalition. I've signed on in opposition as a mayor. So we've done a lot. This is one more step, but we're definitely on board with this. Other comments?
Just that I don't want to broadcast the name and address here, but I know where you can get signs for the No on 6 campaign. So see me afterwards.
Anything else? Someone like to make a motion?
I would move the recommendation, the resolution.
A second.
Poll the council, please.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Nason?
Yes.
Mayor McQuaid?
Yes, and the motion carries. Is there a way that Robert's PowerPoint could be emailed to us, and you never know where we might want to put it on our Facebook pages? Okay, that brings us to new business. Review of FCC accelerating wireless broadband deployment by removing barriers to infrastructure investment, declaratory ruling, and third report and order, WT docket 17-79, docket 17-84. May we have a staff report, please?
Yes, good evening. Before you tonight is a study session item, so we are not asking you to take formal action, but we are providing you with a background presentation on some recently adopted FCC regulations that pertain to permitting of small cell wireless facilities. So for your review this evening, we've provided you not only with a staff report, but we've also gave you the full FCC order, as well as some additional information in your packet. And what we hope to accomplish from our discussion this evening is to get some direction from you and ultimately come back with a draft ordinance that would establish permitting provisions for small cell application processing. So to give you some recent background, on September 26th of this year, the FCC adopted accelerating wireless broadband deployment by removing barriers to infrastructure investment. This deployment pertains specifically to small cell facilities for wireless carriers, and it goes into effect 3 months from the date of adoption, so it'd be the end of this year. To give you a little more local context, this pertains to 5G antennas that would be predominantly implemented within the public right-of-way. So utility poles owned by PG&E and potentially city-owned streetlights with a city-executed agreement is where this infrastructure would be located. Just a few kind of key takeaways for you to understand. What this law does is it limits our application fees that we can charge. So we're limited to $100 per small cell facility. We also have a limitation on fees that we could collect in the event that we were to lease our light standards for this type of infrastructure. You may recall we are bound by shot clock provisions established in federal law, and what this means is we have a time restriction on how long we can take to process an application, and so this law establishes 2 shot clock provisions for these small cell facilities. The first is a 60-day for a co-location on a pre-existing structure. So what that means is you have an existing utility pole or light standard, an application comes in, there's 60 days total from the time that application is submitted for us to process it and issue a permit for the facility. The 90-day window pertains to new builds, so if PG&E was to replace a pole, we would have a 90-day window in which to process that application. There's also some provisions in the law relating to development standards, including some aesthetic and undergrounding requirements. But more specifically within the law, there are height specifications, so facilities mounted on structures 50 feet or less in height, including their antennas, as defined by federal provision. They can be mounted on structures no more than 10% taller than other adjacent structures. And they do not extend existing structures in which they are located to a height exceeding 50 feet or more. They're 50 feet or by more than 10%, whichever is greater. So what we anticipate doing is coming back to you with an ordinance for further review and discussion. Given the time restrictions in which we would have to process these applications, we would ideally include this in Chapter 14 of the city's municipal code, which is work on public property. It's also known as our encroachment permit process. And we would have language in there specifically to address the small cell facility installation in public right-of-way. It is a ministerial act, and so it would ultimately be approved at a staff level once a determination is made that the application is complete and meets specific criteria. There would not be a formal public hearing. However, staff would develop procedures for applicants to provide public notification to nearby residents. And just to give you an example, in Berkeley, they have had an encroachment permit process for several years. They require as a condition of the application that the carrier do some public engagement where they are proposing facilities so that at the time they make a submittal, they've already addressed that as part of their application completeness.
And can Berkeley continue to do that under this new FCC rules?
Yeah, I don't believe there's a preclusion that would restrict that. One other thing to note, we are bound by the 60-day processing timeline. However, we could establish an administrative appeal process if you were to direct us to do so. But just one thing to keep in mind is that if there is an appeal process, we are still bound by that 60-day window, so we would have to process any appeal within that time frame. As part of your packet, we also included a model ordinance that was provided by the League of Cities that could provide a potential framework for the City of Albany to use. We would obviously have to tailor it to some of our local regulations, but this would serve as a model going forward. And so we've included that for you. Just to kind of bring you up to date on where we are with our current wireless ordinance contained in Chapter 20, that was adopted by the Council on April 20th, 2015. And at that time, there was a concern regarding the installation of wireless facilities in residentially zoned districts, with some direction for this to go to Planning and Zoning Commission to review those regulations. We did go back to the Planning and Zoning Commission. We never did formally amend that section of the municipal code. And part of it is because we've had so many changes in federal law. Within a year of that ordinance being adopted, there were already federal provisions which made sections of the ordinance inapplicable. And so with that, we would welcome your feedback and any public comment, and we would anticipate coming back to you with a draft ordinance later this fall.
Other questions from council?
So this applies only to the small cell, aka 5G installations, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so we still have the ability to hold a public hearing about other cell installations and have design review on those as well.
Right. So, for example, if there was a facility, a new facility, a monopole, that type of thing, our other provisions as far as design review, use permits, so on and so forth, would come into play.
Okay. So presumably these new installations are somewhat more limited in size than other cell antennas. Typically, how large are they? Do you know?
I don't know of specific dimensions, but typically they are installed on top of existing poles, and I think, you know, they're not, they add some height, and they certainly add some visibility to the structure, but I don't think they, you know, they certainly don't double the size.
I presume they're probably not that obtrusive, probably.
I think somewhere in that federal pronouncement, 116 pages of it, I noticed there was actually a definition in there of an exact sort of size of what these things are.
All right.
And they're not very big.
Okay. All right.
So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I had.
No questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions. It sounds like this is coming. And I'm presuming that these will probably replace a lot of the existing cell tower antennas that we have, or that's the ultimate goal of this system?
I'm not entirely sure that it would replace existing facilities. I mean, the technology is constantly evolving, but I don't know that there is really any specific plan to vacate existing facilities.
You know, again, this is a technological question, but can these little boxes be shared by different carriers, or will each one have to have their own box?
I believe each carrier has their own facility, because they all have different networks that they serve.
And I guess, well, I had some number of questions here, but the only one I'll ask at this point is, this fee structure that they're saying, this is the fee structure, can we work with that? I mean, do you have any sense, is this actually going to be doable for, you know, our staff and, you know?
Yeah, I will say we're not really at cost recovery on this, but because it's prescribed at the federal level, we will work within that framework.
Okay.
I mean, as you may recall, though we haven't had wireless applications recently from your time on the commission, as you know, those were fairly contentious review, went through multiple staff reports and commission meetings, and in some instances resulted in litigation, so.
Right. Okay.
So, Michael, before you jump in, I just want to ask a question based on what he said. If each carrier needs their own box, how many boxes can go on a pole?
I think it's just one antenna per pole. I don't think that you can have multiple antennas on one pole.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Michael.
Well, litigation brings up an interesting question. What's going on out there with challenging this? This does seem like a overreach on the part of the feds, which is what you'd expect from the current people in the FCC, but are we sure this is going to stick? Is there any sense out there?
I haven't done any research specifically on lawsuits that may have been filed in the time since this was signed. I wouldn't be surprised. Just, you know, again, in some local context, this is very similar to SB 649, which was being considered by the legislature in California last year.
It passed and was vetoed by the governor.
It was vetoed, but it's structured very similarly, and as you recall.
That's because it comes from the same people.
Yes.
Yeah, the other issue is the 60-day turnaround. That's crazy. I mean, that basically we're not allowed to do anything and not able to collect any money for trying to do it. So we'll see. Just, I'm going to editorialize here for about 60 seconds. I was a big fan. There was a time when cellular networks were about replacing landlines, and if you didn't have a landline, you didn't have a good way to call 911 if your grandfather was having a heart attack. So I was a big fan of saying, okay, we need robust cellular communications in this town. What's going on now with 5G is the phone companies are trying to privatize internet service. These 5G boxes can dump a lot of information. They're talking about 10 gigabit speeds, which is 10 times faster than my SonicNet 1 gig fiber optic connection. Whether or not they'll ever get there, I doubt it. But this is so you can stream your Netflix movies on your phone anywhere you go in the U.S. But they're not really going to do this in rural areas. They're not telling you that either. It's too expensive. But the downside is they've gone to much higher frequencies, which can carry more information, but which don't shoot through walls very well. So they really have to put up a lot of these boxes, and they have to pound the signal through the walls of your house. It's really pretty messy, ugly stuff. We have no idea what that. There has been some good stuff coming out of the NIH recently on the health effects of radio frequencies that we didn't know before. We have no idea what this stuff does. There's never been any study of it. And we're basically giving up control thanks to the FCC. And it would be nice if we could figure out a way to fight it, but I don't think we can. It's totally superfluous. I have a 1 gig fiber connection. If I wanted to watch a movie on Netflix, I can do it already. I don't need this in my neighborhood. 2G has already disappeared. I know because I had one of those cute little flip phones that I used as my emergency phone for bike rides in case occasionally I would turn it on to see if it still worked, and it doesn't work anymore. And I called AT&T and they said, we don't support 2G anymore. So there's still 3G and 4G out there, and they'll probably keep those towers up for some amount of time unless they can integrate them into these little boxes. And maybe they can do that, I don't know. And there's a question of spacing. I don't know how many poles, how much spacing you need. Could you put 2 on the same pole? I doubt it, because they wouldn't all be high enough. But the other issue is, what happens if we have undergrounded utilities on some block? There's not stuff to hang these boxes on. I'm curious as to what they do. Is that going to, typically we don't underground utilities in Albany very much, although we did recently along Marin, I'm sorry. So there are some questions. Do they have the right to install poles, for example? If there's not enough poles out there, what are they going to do? It's not clear to me what's happening. So anyway, end of lecture.
Otherwise,
There is mention, just to your comment, there is mention in there about decorative poles. So I think some of that is being anticipated. But what that means, hard to know.
do you have speaker cards? Is there public comment?
Thank you, Michael. Said half of what I was going to say. Ann, can you put that picture up if you have a second?
It's on the laptop.
Oh, I don't know what to do with that. I have no idea. Good evening, Ed Fields. I'll try to squeeze this into 3 minutes. Quote, instead of working with our state and local partners to speed the way to 5G deployment, we cut them out. We tell them that going forward, Washington will make choices for them about which fees are permissible and which are not, about which aesthetic choices are viable and which are not, with complete disregard for the fact that these infrastructure decisions do not work the same in New York, and New York, Iowa. So it comes down to this. 3 unelected officials on this dais are telling state and local leaders all across the country what they can and cannot do in their own backyards. This is extraordinary federal overreach. I do not believe the law permits Washington to run roughshod over state and local authority like this, and I worry the litigation that follows will only slow our 5G future, unquote. FCC Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel. In the ruling, the FCC considers service to be, quote, any covered service a provider wishes to provide incorporating the abilities and performance characteristics it wishes to employ, unquote. In other words, anything they want to do is okay. Verizon is right now surveying PG&E poles in Albany. What are they rolling out first? 5G in-home internet, which is actually better, faster, and more securely provided by the Sonic and AT&T fiber optic cables already in place in Albany. But with 5G, you get an antenna transmitting inside your own home. What is completely missing from the discussion? The health effects on humans and other creatures from this soon-to-be omnipresent, very high-frequency millimeter wave electromagnetic radiation. At gigahertz, that's thousands of megahertz frequencies, a honeybee becomes a good resonator. Wavelengths can be a half an inch. We don't know the effects on humans from this type of constant radiation emanating from the poles outside our homes. Here's a headline from Newsweek, May 19, 2018. Quote, radiation from cell phones, Wi-Fi is hurting the birds and the bees. 5G may make it worse. Technology is quite literally destroying nature, with a new report further confirming that electromagnetic radiation from power lines and cell towers can disorientate birds and insects and destroy plant health. The paper warns that as nations switch to 5G, this threat could increase, unquote. I don't know what that is. I just happened to see that in Emeryville today. I have no idea what that is. It wasn't the National League of Cities. I'm sorry, it wasn't the California League of Cities. It was the National League of Cities. Beware of that as a model. And they can have lots of equipment below. Oh, the antenna. There's the antenna. It's hard for me to even see. There's the equipment. Now, there's the antennas up there on the bracket. I guess you're missing the top. That's all equipment that they lump at the bottom. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Something, right?
Good evening, Signe Matson, longtime resident of Albany. And I just want to second everything that Ed said, and Mr. Barnes, you as well. The little one that he left out of all the life forms on Earth is even the ants now are getting disoriented. And being a constant presence at the Gill Tract Farm, I worry about lots besides the people and my grandchildren, the rest of the life forms. And Mayor McQuaid, I just wanted to remind you, Stephanie Thomas has sent a good batch of material, and my hope is that you would share it with the rest of the council members, and it really will serve you well to read the evidence. You know, currently we've so given up to the forces of capital and total disregard for the basic needs of the people and the life on the planet. And I really do propose to you that perhaps it's time to realize what's going on and look at something besides capital and the power of capital. It's destroying us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will forward the email from Ms. Thomas to the council. Thank you.
I'm Gerhard Brostrom, longtime Albany citizen resident. I'm a founder of Transition Albany, and I want to say that we've been ready to put on a program here in Albany on the dangers of various types of radiation, which we have filling our schools. We have our students going to and from school with cell phones in their pockets. There is a film that's been shown some places in the community that we are working with scientists in Berkeley trying to bring to Albany to show as part of our regular program. We are primarily interested in climate, but the kinds of problems that come up with industries like telecommunications put together with internet, various industries, are typical of the kinds of big lies that we can see regarding tobacco use from big tobacco, or from people who are selling us bills of goods about climate and what our solutions need to be. So this is an issue we're very interested in, and we have had today proposed that we look to providing a model, working with El Cerrito, working with Berkeley, who are also working with this issue. These kinds of threats possibly can't be seen as being separated just by city boundaries. So anyway, I ask you to consider these materials that the mayor was sent today, and we want to work with citizens in all our surrounding communities on these kinds of issues. We are at Transition Albany. I would like your continuing support as we move into our 7th year. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other speakers?
Hi, my name is Caroline Chen, and I've lived in Albany for 25 plus years. I just want to state that I totally oppose 5G. There is really no health safety test on it. And in 2011, the WHO deemed microwave radio frequency radiation as class 2B, which is probable carcinogen. So that's just something to think about. Now, I have a telephone pole that is right across the street from my house. And from SB 649, it stated that there would be a 5G small cell every 2 to 10 homes. So the chances are that I will probably have a 5G cell across the street from my house. What can I do about that? Can I come to the city council and protest, get it removed? Anyway, I just, and several days ago when I was walking my dog, I live on San Carlos and at Washington, and there was a tree trimmer hired by the city of Albany, and he was trimming the tree, but it was like very aggressively. Well, I don't know if you know this or not, but trees will mitigate some 5G. So that's just something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council for final comments. And the one thing I want to start with again is that we have as a council fought this. We fought 649 really hard. We sent letters opposing it. We were part of the coalition opposing it. We encouraged the governor to veto it, and we were successful in that. We felt pretty good about it. Then the federal government got involved with Senate Bill 3157. Again, we opposed that. We've opposed this every step of the way. I think we'll continue to monitor it, and I would certainly hope that staff is sort of following this as far as all of the legal challenges that will come, and I'd like to see us join what legal challenges feel appropriate. Other comments?
Just second those remarks and invite us to join any coalition, opposing this overreach.
And there's a great deal of opposition in Marin County. I suspect that over there might be folks who are involved in building the coalition against this.
Other comments?
Yeah, I'll make some comments. Yeah, I totally agree with what was being said out there, but thinking about it over the weekend, reading through this, the volume of stuff that the FCC put out, which is totally fascinating on some level. It really talks, it's just this giant justification of why they have to do this. This is the race to 5G. And it never really explains why we're racing to 5G, but it's something that obviously they think we need to be doing. Is it federal overreach in the way this has come down? Absolutely. Potential health consequences, I don't know. We were still trying to figure out the health consequences of previous technologies that we were getting, and that's still an open question, and this will probably remain an open question. Will it destroy nature? I noticed in their FCC report that they think 97% of these things will be going on in rural areas. So there's no hiding for nature, I'm afraid. It does have the promise of very disruptive technology, though. Okay, so if you can put aside all these things that are potentially we don't know about or we know are just not good, this could be the beginning of driverless cars. Your appliances will be able to talk to each other. There's a lot of stuff that could come down the pike that will come out of this if it doesn't kill us first, I suspect. But whether this will be a new age in consciousness for human beings or the beginning of the Terminator Wars, I'm not quite sure. With all those thoughts, we're going to have to deal with it. So I think we are going to have to come up with some way to how we're going to process applications. There's talk in there about design review for historic areas. I don't know that we have any historic areas, but if we're going to come up with something about how this is going to look, and not like the photograph that Ed put up there, which I'm not sure if that's the one that's near the BART tracks on, I think it's Santa Fe, but there's something very similar to that on Santa Fe, and it's just terrible. So whatever we can come up with, I think that would be a good thing. The question about undergrounding utilities, I think we got to start thinking how this is going to affect that. We might be able to fight this off, I don't know, but in any case, I think we have to deal with it while it's here. So that's my comments.
Mm-hmm. Michael, you're done? So our charge was to give you direction going forward. I don't think we need a motion. Did you sort of get the sense of where we are? Great. And you'll come back to us with an ordinance at some point? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay.
One last question. Will this go before planning and zoning again if we're going to be developing an ordinance, particularly around things like the aesthetic look or?
Chapter 14 would not go to Planning and Zoning Commission. It would be within the purview of City Council.
Okay.
Okay. Item 12, other business announcements of events, future agenda items. Anything? Okay, our next council meeting will be Monday, November 5th. We are adjourning tonight in memory of two members of our Albany community who recently passed away. Jacob Brill was a 2000 graduate of Albany High School and was an avid fisherman and a former Boy Scout. And also Michael Goldman, who lived on Peralta for over 40 years, was a father of 3 Albany High grads and a grandparent of 2 current Albany High School students. From painting scenery at the middle school play to hosting neighborhood meetings, Mike was active in community affairs. He also often volunteered to help with the Friends of the Albany Library book sales, and he also helped the Albany Education Foundation with our Barnes & Noble events. So let's take a moment to remember these 2 Albany residents. And now we are adjourned.